Today we are going to talk about transition words. Now, transition words in younger grades are sometimes called time order words, but time order words or sequence words are actually only one type of transition. That might be the first type that you learn in English, but there are other kinds too that can help you with your speaking, academic speaking, but also with your writing. Let me show you a few of these. I'm going to show you the transition words based on the text structure. That's a fancy academic way of saying how the author puts the ideas together. So if you notice over here, it's kind of like you're building the wall brick by brick. It's how the author is putting them together, just like a bricklayer would put the bricks together to make a side of a building. The transition words then are how the author goes from one idea to the next. It's kind of like, well, if I have this idea and this idea, I can't just put them together if they are not the same. I need a way that's going to get from one side to the other. Just like a bridge helps you get from one side of a body of water to the other side of the body of the water. So my structure is like my wall or my building, and my transition is like my bridge. Let's take a look at a couple of these together. If I am writing something or talking about something that's one main idea, one big idea, and it has lots of details, I call that description because I'm describing something by giving lots of information about it. I might tell you things like to begin with, or most important, or I might give you instances or examples of something. Those are all transitions that would fit with description. Let's take a look at another one. Chronological is what you might know at its time order. Just think of a timeline. The chronology is the time that things go in, or the order that things go in. So you'll have words like first, second, third that you might already know. First, last, next, those words. But there's some other more academic words that you will come across as you're reading and speaking. Not long after, until, during, prior to means the part before it, after or afterwards, as soon as. In the meantime means like I'm doing something or waiting for something, but while I'm waiting for that, I'm going to do something else. Or meanwhile, I might be doing something, and while I'm waiting, something else might happen. Immediately, like right away. Or eventually, like it's not happening yet, but it will. There's another kind that's very similar. It's one thing making something else happen or one thing leading to something else. So there might be a problem. You have to look for the solution. There might be a cause. You might find an effect. Here are some common transition words or bridges from one idea to the next. Since, therefore, thus, consequently, as a result, this led to something else. Due to, nevertheless, accordingly, or if this happens, then something else will happen. Here's my last group of words. Let me move this a bit. Compare and contrast. You might know this as the Venn diagram, the two circles that go over top of each other. What's the same is in the middle. What's different is on the outside edges. Some of those words are transitions that show it's different. However, on the contrary, or on the other hand, in contrast as opposed to. Some of those words that mean it's the same thing as well as, in the same way, similarly, likewise. If I'm telling more, in addition, furthermore, it's kind of like using the word to, but a little bit more academic. And there are a couple others that are transitions. Let's take a look at some practice here. So I've got a few words. Let me just move some over. I've got a few words, and I want you to think about what kind of a transition word is it? Is it used when I'm describing something and I'm telling more about the same idea? Is it something that helps me to go in order of the words, chronological? Is it like problem solution or cause and effect? Or is it when I'm comparing, saying something, how something is the same, or contrasting, saying how it's different? Let's go over a few of these. Therefore, let me think. I was really hungry, therefore I ate a snack. Yeah, that would be cause and effect, problem solution. I could also say I was really hungry. As a result, I had a snack. It sounds a little bit strange when I use it in that context because it was a very informal context, but I used academic words. Here are some more most important. If I'm talking about bats, for example, and I say, most importantly, bats eat insects. That would be, I'm describing them. So that would go over here next to or under description. For instance, or giving examples would be the same one. Can you spot the ones that show time or the chronology of something? That's right. Meanwhile, prior to, meaning before that, and eventually. Which one means something more is going to be added? That's right. And which one means the opposite? That's when you're contrasting, saying how something is different. Here's our last practice. Let me move my picture. Okay. So here's how you usually put transition words into what you're writing. You have a sentence or a paragraph. Then you put in your transition, and then you go to the next sentence or the next paragraph. So I have groups of 2 sentences. I want you to add the transition where you think it fits. Think of a good transition or an adequate transition that goes in the middle of each of these sets. So here's 1, here's 2, and here's 3. You may pause the video at this time to think about which transitions would work for each of those 3 examples. I hope you've had time to consider those options. I'm going to put in some that would work. These are not the only right answers, but they're one example. It was a beautiful day. We ate outside. I could use the transition thus. Cause and effect. It was a beautiful day, so we ate outside. A transition, though, I could use thus or therefore. It was a beautiful day, thus we ate outside. Let's look at the next one. I was working in the garden. My husband was mowing the lawn. Well, that could happen at the same time. So I'm going to use the word meanwhile. I was working in the garden. Meanwhile, my husband was mowing the lawn. Here's my last one. My mom always helps me. She washes my clothes. Washing my clothes would be an example of how she helps. So I'm going to say, for example. I could also use for instance. It means the same thing.